for you.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of October 19th. If you could please pay attention to Councilman Deputy Mayor Padilla for the invocation to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. Today we have as our guest Pastor Marcus Clark. Pastor Marcus Clark is a third-generation preacher and founding pastor, following in the footsteps of his grandfather who served as chairman of the Governor Religious Affairs Commission for the state of Michigan. Like his father, he is a seminary graduate from American Baptist College in Nashville, where he received his social justice training. Pastor Clark is happily married to Navis Clark, and together they have 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl. That keeps you busy. And the eldest son is currently playing defensive back for Washburn University football team. Pastor Clark was called to Topeka in 2013 to serve the community as a pastor and currently serves as lead pastor for Love Fellowship Church in East Topeka. Under his leadership, Love Fellowship Church has partnered with USD 501 to feed families during COVID-19 and regularly provides Toys for Tots during the Christmas season with the Salvation Army. Love Fellowship unites with other local churches and hosts 2 back-to-school drives donating backpacks filled with supplies for families. Pastor Clark proudly served as co-chair of the task force for Washburn Tech East, a $6 million budget that now offers promising futures to local students. Pastor Clark hosts a morning podcast entitled Life, spelled L-Y-F-E, Living Your Faith Every Day, and continues to be a supportive partner of the Greater Topeka Partnership Vision Momentum 2027. Welcome, Pastor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you all. Let's pray. God, we thank you for this night. Thank you for the privilege to serve. I pray now for these, your sons and daughters, my brothers and sisters, who you've gifted so well. And I pray, God, that you will give them wisdom and let them move in guidance as they steward over your people, precious cargo. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, Pastor Clark, those of us who have been to your church understand that you do not pray that way. You do not preach that way. There's a little bit more and passion when you're providing the word. But it's okay, we'll take that for tonight. We now move on to the roll call.
Mayor De La Isla.
Here.
Council members Hiller.
Here.
Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz. Emerson.
Here.
Padilla.
Here.
Nager.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Lesser.
Here.
We have 9 present.
9 being present, we have quorum. We proceed now to the appointments. If the clerk would read, the mayor does not vote on this item.
A is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Tony Beck to the Topeka Board of Zoning Appeals to fill an unexpired term ending November 2, 2024. And B is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Donna Ray Pearson to the Topeka Planning Commission for a term ending October 19, 2024.
Governing body, you have the appointments in front of you. What is the pleasure of the governing body?
Move to approve.
Do we have a second? Motion by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcara. Councilwoman Hiller.
I just wanted to mention, to claim Donna Ray Pearson as a resident of District 1, not the 3-mile jurisdiction.
Yes. Thank you. Additional comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we proceed by voting, and at this point in time, all those opposed? Seeing none opposed, the motion carries unanimously. We do have with us Ms. Pearson here. If you could please rise so that we could recognize you. Thank you so much for your commitment to our community. We now move on to presentations. Presentation of Development Growth Management Third Quarter Report. And I see Mr. Feiender getting up before I could call you City Manager.
Director Feiner will provide our report tonight.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Your Honor, council members. It's good to be back presenting these reports to you. It's been a few quarters, so tonight we will, everything that we're presenting is a year-to-date trend and figures with a little bit of projection towards the end of the year. We usually present just the quarter, but this is the whole year to date. So with that in mind, let's proceed. So we try to track our development activity. One way we do that is through our permit trends. You can see here that we continue to trend up with our overall permit activity. Not too surprising, last year we're up a little bit from last year, from the COVID year, but we are actually 11% over our 5-year average. So again, overall permit activity in the building trades and continue to go up, and that is a good sign. When you split that up and look at commercial and residential, first we'll look at residential. You see a little bit more what's going on. This first slide shows the number of housing units that have been permitted to date in the city. That red line that on the graph there, that's your new housing units. You can see as you get over to the right there, it starts to really spike up. That's the last 2 years. We've really gone up quite a bit. We are at 371 units permitted this year. That compares to 293 from last year, so we're up 80, and we're not even done with this year. And that pales in comparison to our 5-year average. We tended to average about 110 to 120 units a year, and so we're about 3 times that right now this year. So it's really good news, really good to see that there's some housing supply coming onto the market. Okay. Am I changing? We're figuring this out. Okay. Continuing on residential, there's a couple different data points we like to track to see if we're on the right path. This one shows our housing diversity, if you will. The bars, the green indicates single-family units. The blue bar would indicate non-single family, so a lot of multifamily attached product. The bar on the left is the past decade. We were very heavy green there, so very heavy single-family development, almost a little more than 60% of all of our units in that last decade were single-family. Coming out of the housing study, we really wanted to take more leaps into a more diversified typology with our housing, more attached products, multifamily, and so you can see the middle bar is last year. We started to go up quite a bit with our multifamily, non-single family, and this year continues that trend. We basically flipped the script from the previous decade, so now we're almost at 80% of our units that were permitted this year are of the non-single family nature, and that's very good to give, not just from an affordability standpoint, but also the housing choices, to have more housing choices, because we nationwide are going more towards rental and less home ownership, so having that stock is really important in our community. Okay, thank you. Another way to measure if our growth management policies in place are impacting where the units are being created. You can see here we continue to trend up with most of the units in the county being permitted or constructed in the city. The last 2 years have gone up quite a bit. We're almost at 80% of this year of all the units in the county have been permitted in the city. The kind of the 5-year average or the past decade, we were in the 40s and 50%. So we've gone up quite a bit. Again, with our priority area being the city limits, that tier 1 area, that is really good to see. Whoops, I'm sorry. Where are those happening? Where are those new units happening? That is what this map shows. It kind of gives you a sense. The green dots, circles indicate where the new units have been permitted this year. Southwest, south, southeast area. The largest concentration, you see number 7 there, that's Wheatfield Village. Those apartments total of 173 units. Number 9 as well, probably our next highest, that's the Cedarhurst complex at 17th and Urish. That is assisted independent living. We've also, the rest of those green dots are pretty much single family and 2-family subdivisions. The orange dots, the orange circles, are new subdivisions that have come before you this year. The reason we put those on there, and it's about 190, I believe, lots, that shows the pipeline. So the green is actual construction going on, but we want to make sure we're replenishing that pipeline of new lots to come online, because to ultimately develop subdivisions doesn't happen overnight. You have to plan for it, have to make sure utilities and services are there, as well as getting the subdivision completed. So, please, next slide would show you why we track that. We are currently at about 6 years of inventory for single and 2-family lots. These are lots that have streets or in benefit districts, and once you start to get, I've said this before, once you start to get into that 5-year range, you might get a little nervous that we better have some stuff in the pipeline. And that's why I wanted to show you this, because although we're at 6 years now on our current pace, and we've picked up the pace the last few years, those lots that I just showed you, those 3 subdivisions would add another couple years worth of inventory. So that's good. That's good news. Those don't all happen at once. Those come in phases. So those get metered in over the next few years, and that'll be a good thing. Okay. All right, let's pivot to our commercial growth and commercial trends. By way of permits, you can see that we're up 11% from last year total, but we're a little bit under projections for our pre-COVID years, just slightly. We were down a bit last year with our commercial permits, so no surprise here that we're up a little more this year. But on the other hand, we also recognize what are the values that have been created. So when a permit comes in, there's a construction value, and this is what this measures. We total those up and gives us a good indication of, are we, even though we might be either flat or just incrementally below our 5-year average, we still are seeing very good values coming in. So that's a lot more of investment, bigger projects, bigger scale. We are projecting a $228 million by the end of the year in permit value, which would be 12% over last year and 36% over our 5-year average. Most of those commercial permits are occurring in one of 2 areas. Our downtown or our I-70 Wanamaker corridor area. 35% of all that value that you just saw is happening in one of those 2 areas. Okay, to give you a sense of some of the specific projects that have come in to date this year, some of the bigger projects. It's a bit top heavy with some very larger scale projects. Go ahead, Liz. We talked about Wheatfield Village and 173 units that is under construction at 29th and Fairlawn. Washburn University School of Law, that's a 2-story, I believe 60,000+ square foot facility that is on its way up at 21st and Washburn. Hill's Pet Nutrition had a $12 million addition, about 14,000 square feet at their pet food plant at Crane and the river. We talked about Cedarhurst at 17th and Urish. That is an $8 million construction value. And then lastly, we'll stop here, we'll just wrap up with a process update. So we currently are updating our public portal across all of our platforms. The issue, I don't know if many of you know, that we had online permit applications that you could submit. You could track how your permit is going, the review comments and the status, but it did not allow people to submit directly into our CityWorks system. It did not allow people to pay directly, and so it was a matter of downloading the document, printing it off, signing it, scanning it back, sending it, emailing it back, and attaching your plans. There was a lot of breaking down and packing, and so we've cut out the middleman, so to speak. And so now, with the help of TSG, we have expanded this idea across all platforms of our development applications. You can now directly submit your application and pay without ever printing anything out or picking up the phone. And we have that for our zoning platting applications, our contractor license renewals, and then we continue to have it for our building permit. All of those, with the building permit one will be, we're going through a grace period now, but we are looking at requiring online applications starting in 2022, including a plan review fee, which we've been deferring till the end of the permit issuance. So we think these are going to make, again, more efficiencies and streamlining and save some cost for our customers and time. So we look forward to continuing to work on those. We've got about we have about 22 dozen applications, forms for building permits. We have about 8 to 10 of those up right now. And those are the most used ones. The other ones will be coming online soon. Okay, so with that, if you have ever need to look more at those trends, figures, we publish a development and growth management report every month. Just Google DGM report, Topeka, you are public, and you can look at past trends and current trends. So with that, I'll stand for any questions tonight.
Bill, before questions, I just want to say that it's wonderful that now people can just upload everything and not have to go through the middleman. I mean, I think that it's going to really help with efficiency also for your team of having to review stuff and grab it. And so this is wonderful news.
Yeah.
More of that, please. Questions or comments? Councilman Dobler.
Thanks, Bill. I like the trend. We're growing. I think what I'd like to see is a comparison to the other cities that we compete against. And I'm thinking just, if we look at the top 10, I think we were number 9 in the top 10 and as far as growth in the 2020 census. So I don't know how you do that, but if it's per capita, number of new residential units per capita or something like that, something that would just give us an idea of, okay, growth is good, but, how are we doing compared to our competitors just down the road? I won't mention their name. But,
You mean our friends?
yeah, or those a bit beyond that fine city. So maybe next time we could talk a little bit about.
We can do some pure city. Yeah, we can look. Most of the cities will have something online, or we can call them and find out.
And even just a representative, 3 or 4 cities, I think would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple related questions. If we could dial back to the slides that showed the multifamily versus the single family, and maybe the one before that. 2 questions. One, where does Calamar fit in there? Were they originally permitted in 2019? Or 2020, I mean?
They were permitted in 2020, so they would not be in this bucket, if you will.
Except they're not complete, so it's still 100 and some units
Correct.
pending.
So,
In
sorry.
addition to what?
Make this so, okay, so of those, there's the multifamily. So you can kind of see here that that's what they're in the middle bar, in the blue bar for 2020. And so these count permitted by permit year, not by completion year. So that, yes, they'll be coming online in 2022.
Also, we hope.
With 100, yes, we are, it looks good.
Good. Well, I went out there and it looked the same, so just checking.
And I can give you a little update if that helps, but.
Okay, and then I wanted to ask about single family.
Okay.
Because with the percents, I wanted you to just help me or all of us walk back through, since the totals are different, you know, how we're doing on just single family.
Oh, yeah, and that shows, I can show you where that is.
Yeah, thank you.
But Calmar, we did speak to them the other week, checked in, and their financing is still getting wrapped up. They are hitting their milestones. There's no apparent obstacles, but those things take time, and they have to kick in some more equity, and along with their bank has to rewrite the loan. So that should be wrapped up. They are hoping early November. And whether it's not they want to start in the middle of winter or not, but they could at least begin to start activating and getting reactivated on the site. So so stay tuned. Again, we're keeping track of that. As far as the single family, so let's go to the, I think it's the next
Might have been before that.
slide. Sorry.
Sorry.
No. Are you doing? Go ahead. Okay. There we go. In the table, the next to last line, next to last row, in that table, it says 2-year average single/2-family building permits. And you see, fourth quarter from last year, we were at 75. We are a year. When we updated, since we had a good year last year, it's now up to 89 a year.
Okay.
For the last 2 years. This year, we're already, we may get to 100 if it continues to go. I think we're in the 90s right now with our single and 2-family development. So that 89 might end up being a 93 2-year average. So it continues to even that continues to trend up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Finder, I guess while we got this slide up, a question. Is there anything significant about 1970 as a year that we consider just?
We wanted to, it was important to exclude subdivisions that had laid vacant for a long time. So we wanted to get more recent. You could probably shift that to 1980. I'd say most of those are going to be happening after 1990 anyway. But we do have a year or so just of more recent vintage subdivisions. That's the only matter.
Yeah, because I'm thinking the street I grew up over in Highland Park, and I guess it was probably developed in the 60s, but
Right.
there's 2 like vacant lots and they're never going to be built, now, because you can't go build a new, house that'd be $250,000 and
Right.
between $2 $50,000 houses.
Correct. So this is more of a reality check. We didn't want to include, as much as your street is, that you grew up on is, I'm sure, very much more valuable.
Well, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
I'm sure me growing up, I really helped the value. Yeah.
But this is an undercount of all the vacant lots in the city. We call it the buildable prime vacant, meaning there's a street or a benefit district and it was recently platted. So these were meant to be developed in recent memory, something in the 60s, 50s, or before. If it's vacant now, it's probably not a prime location.
Yeah,
So-
and I just wonder even if you did move that to the 80s or the 90s, because at what point there's really not going to be a house built,
Right.
at some
So
point.
we could adjust, yeah, we could adjust that as well. But I, in looking at it, most of that came in, we had a pretty big peak in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, early 2000s, yeah.
And if I could just ask another, and that's great to hear about the plan review being uploaded. being able to upload plans.
yeah.
Do you also do the review now electronically?
Correct. Yeah, everything is, all the reviews are done by Bluebeam software. All of our team outside of our department, the engineers, utilities are doing reviews, fire, all doing reviews by Bluebeam software. So that is in place, that has been in place, but we still had that little middleman to get rid of, so we could get it directly into the system, and then when it gets into the system, in the CityWorks, it goes out and gets into the people's boxes for review. And
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
sure.
Other comments or questions for Mr. Fyander? I don't see Hannah or Mike on the little screen. Okay, seeing none, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
presentation. We now move on to the consent agenda, if the clerk would read.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Michael Padilla granting Louis Constantino an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at SEEK concerning noise prohibitions. B is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout approving a special event known as the Norseman Spookeasy. C are minutes of the regular meeting of October 12, 2021, and there are no applications.
What is the pleasure of the governing body? We have a motion for approval by Councilman Dobler. We have a second by the Deputy Mayor. Comments or questions with regards to the consent agenda? Seeing none, we proceed by voting. All those opposed? Seeing no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. Oh. She's like, it's my hair. We now move on to the action items. Action item A, if the clerk would read.
A is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout authorizing and directing the issuance, sale, and delivery of $6,900,000 of taxable general obligation temporary notes, Series 2021B of the City of Topeka, Kansas, providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax if necessary for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on said notes as they become due, making certain covenants and agreements to provide for the payment and security thereof, and authorizing certain other documents and actions connected therewith.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So tonight, we're talking about the issuance of temporary notes, the proceeds of which will provide temporary financing for 9 city-at-large projects which have been included in either the 2022 or previous capital improvement plans. The temporary notes will fund 9 projects that have been included in these plans. They include Fire Station Number 3 improvements, other fire station improvements, the 2022 FIRM program, and special assessment street and sewer projects. These notes mature on October 1, 2022, but are subject to optional redemption earlier. There would not be an immediate budgetary impact for the note. The source of funding, the note will be ultimately retired by using cash currently on hand in the debt service fund, with the exception of the special assessment projects, which will be permanently financed by special assessment GO bonds in 2022. The reason for the additional funding is there was about $4 million saved by projects that occurred under budget and about $2.9 million in interest savings from non-issuance of notes. Staff recommends approval.
We have heard the city manager's presentation. Do we have any comments or questions for him? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of the governing body? Councilwoman Hiller,
Move to approve, and thank you.
You're welcome.
do we? Thank you. Second by Councilman Emerson. Additional comments or questions before we proceed with the vote? Seeing none, all those opposed? Seeing no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. We now move on to item 6, non-action items. First item is item A, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion related to the Valley Park Neighborhood Plan as an element of the comprehensive plan.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we have a presentation as it relates to the Valley Park Neighborhood Plan. Bryson Risley, it's Risley, right? Come forward. Bryson will provide that update to us and presentation on what the community, that neighborhood decided they wanted to do. Bryson?
Thank you, City Manager. Mayor, members of the council, this is the presentation for the Valley Park Neighborhood Plan. This was the 2021 SORT awardee. So just a refresher on SORT. SORT stands for Stages of Resource Targeting. It provides targeted infrastructure and housing improvements into a single neighborhood. Valley Park had not received SORT or implementation funding before, so this was the first neighborhood plan for the neighborhood. This is a 3-year process with the planning process wrapping up now. Years 2 and 3 will be project design and implementation. This will bring up to $1.7 million in infrastructure funds and $330,000 in housing rehabilitation funds. The Valley Park planning area is roughly 195 acres. It is bounded by Southwest 21st Street to the north, Southwest Randolph Avenue to the west, Shunga Drive to the south, and Washburn Avenue to the east. Some process and background for what we've covered for about the last 6 months. We had our kickoff meeting in March. We had 9 members of the community attend that meeting. And then from April to the end of July, we had regular committee meetings. Some of those were virtual, some of those were in person. We had our final meeting on September 8th. At that point, we presented the neighborhood plan to the community. They approved from there in the neighborhood plan and the infrastructure projects as well. A brief history of the neighborhood. So prior to the 1940s, this was known as Romig's Dairy Farm. And then post-World War II and kind of that booming of housing development, the neighborhood really kind of blossomed. So in that 15 years, you had a lot of single-family residential. This neighborhood is 68% single-family residential with commercial and multifamily uses along 21st Street. In 1951, there was a flood that caused damage to some of those new homes along Shunga Creek. A dam was built at 37th and Gage at that time to try and prevent future flooding events. Then in 1966, the tornado comes through Topeka, starting at Burnett's Mound. For the most part, it jumps the neighborhood, but does have some damage along the periphery there. And then in 2007, the neighborhood floods again from Shunga Creek. Some of the plan highlights. So this was the neighborhood returned to a healthy health rating. We found sound housing conditions for much of the neighborhood. We built upon that in the plan, pushing for home ownership investment in single-family housing. And additionally, we put our target areas to align with those goals as well. So we really focused on making sure those rehabilitation funds and infrastructure projects were outside of the floodplain and floodway in this neighborhood to make sure that those housing funds were maximized. Additionally, we included a transitional land use area along Southwest 21st Street, and then we also included a floodplain appendix for the neighborhood. This looked at some of the challenges of developing in the floodplain, as well as resources for flood insurance, as well as some FEMA resources for how to flood-proof a home. Looking at the health map here for 2020, again, this is the first time the neighborhood has been healthy since 2007. The big thing there was a drop in the percent of persons below poverty. You also see that outlined in green, average residential property values and single-family home ownership. Average residential property values have stagnated since 2007, and single-family home ownership has continued to drop since 2003. So those are two things to continue monitoring for this neighborhood. Looking at housing conditions, we've covered some of the topics on this slide. There were nearly 1,300 housing deficiencies. The vast majority of those were considered minor deficiencies and did not really bring down the housing scores for that neighborhood. Infrastructure conditions, this is really looking at pavement, curb and gutter, and sidewalks. There hadn't been any pavement projects completed in this neighborhood in a while, so that was the top priority for members of the community. There were also some curb and gutter and sidewalk projects that would be eligible as well. It should be noted that the neighborhood really lacks sidewalks. There are very few sidewalks in this neighborhood. And these are two images of the street conditions along McVicker and 24th Street. So those were some of the key streets as well. Future land use, we touched on the transition zone along 21st Street. This is to ensure that any pressure for higher intensity development along that arterial road is accounted for and respects the character of the neighborhood as it is. And then on number 2, we identified that as a potential medium density residential property. It's currently a vacant lot, and with the commercial to the north and single family to the south, that would kind of give that transition zone as well. Target areas are a key component of the SORT strategy, so that's focusing on those 3 to 5 block areas. What we take is our housing, infrastructure, crime, and owner occupancy maps, and we overlay those to create this one composite map. That's what you see here. We then work to develop those target areas and add those anchors and strengths from the neighborhood onto these maps. We then come back to the community and we have them prioritize these target areas. So what you see here is one is kind of between Randolph and McVicker. That's the primary target area. The secondary target areas between McVicker and that half block east of Jewell. And then the tertiary target area is half block west of College and Washburn, and that's just northeast of Stout Elementary. Next slide. Thank you. So these were the 13 infrastructure projects that the neighborhood approved of. There are 4 new roadway projects, 3 mill and overlay, 3 seal projects, and 3 sidewalk or pedestrian projects. Those total out to just under 1.7 million. The goal here, which you see in blue, are those new roadway, were to improve some of the roadways with the worst pavement conditions. And then the sidewalks and pedestrian projects were to increase the access to Stout Elementary and create those connectivity with the sidewalks. Additionally, we provided some unfunded projects for the neighborhood plan, so as any funds become available, the neighborhood has the opportunity to apply for them. A lot of these projects were broken down into smaller segments, so you will see the same project number for multiples. That's so if the neighborhood wants to take an incremental approach and apply for small segments of a project, they can do so. There's also 3 general projects there, 21, 22, and 23. Those were not specifically identified, but considerations the neighborhood should keep in mind. And then next step is review in November, and then again, project design and implementation in 2022 and 2023. I would take any questions.
Questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not a question, I just really appreciate the work that has been put into this, and I appreciate the neighborhood showing up and making their issues known, especially Susan McClarity. I know that she's been doing a lot of consistent hard work in that area. This is in District 6, so I walked these streets, and I know people in this neighborhood, and I am very appreciative for them. So thank you for your hard work, and I'm excited to see the work being done. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just had a question on the sort projects, and I'm sorry if you said this, if you did, I missed it, but project number 19 is Shunga and Colleges as a pedestrian table. What is that?
The intent there, we had heard through our neighborhood meetings that there were some issues with speeding along Shunga, so that is kind of that elevated platform that would allow for people to cross, so kind of like a speed bump, but it's wide enough to allow for pedestrians to cross.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Bryson, I'm still getting used to this whole sort process, but sort, isn't it usually, is this neighborhood considered an LMI neighborhood?
I do not know off the top of my head. I believe it is considered LMI from the map. I do not know 100% though off the top of my head.
But why wouldn't you know that?
That is my issue. I should have looked at that ahead of time. I would, because it was eligible for sort, I would very much assume that it was an LMI neighborhood.
Okay. And is it normal, is it usual for so much blue to be shown? I mean, usually in the LMI neighborhoods that sort addresses, you see the pink and the red, if they're intensive or outpatient or something of that nature, but is this an unusual area for sort?
I've been catching up on the neighborhood planning process and program. This is a little bit less traditional than what I've seen in the plans I've reviewed and ones I have worked on myself. Typically, they are that at-risk or intensive care. Don't see as much of the outpatient as healthy.
Okay.
City Manager.
Bryson, yeah, thank you. A couple of things that I'll add as it relates to this particular sort approval. At the time they applied, they were in the light blue, the outpatient type category, and they were eligible to apply for sort. Since then, they've moved up. But during that time frame, you remember that the sort application has bonus points that go to those that are at risk or intensive care. And so even with not receiving those bonus points with their ranking, their application was viewed by those at the CAC to be the best application that was available at the time compared to the others. So even though it is abnormal, I would say, to potentially see a sort occur at this particular level, it was viewed by the CAC to be the best application at the time. And that's why they were given the award.
Okay, and I am still becoming familiar as well with the CAC. Who all does the reviewing of it?
Any NIA CAC member are appointed by each NIA attends that meeting. If you did not make an application into SORT, you could then vote on who should receive the SORT funding.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you, Bryson. Thank you, Mayor.
We do have somebody signed up to speak, Ms. Susan McClarity.
Thank you. I
Yes.
want to take the time to thank everybody for the effort that's been put towards this plan. I thought we had some pretty good discussions. The big elephant that we talked about quite a bit had to do with the flood, and they talked about some modifications to address a 25-year flood, and that would really not make a big impact to the neighborhood, because about 75% of our neighborhood is within a 100-year floodplain. So residents still have trouble sleeping at night and that kind of thing, worrying about floods and stuff. So I do believe that this plan is the best possible outcome that we could have with regard to the dollars that were available through the SORT. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to pick up on Susan's comment. There's a fair amount of conversation when Valley Park got picked in the first place. They were a new NIA and what was it they wanted and so on. And when you read the summary and think of her remarks as well, the most important thing to them was the flood issue, which the SORT grant is not addressing at all and is in fact just sort of saying, oh, well, we can't put federal funds in this part of the neighborhood, so we're going to do these other things because we've identified what we'll spend that money on, and we have to spend it all in this side of the neighborhood. And I get that, but I'm troubled about what the plan is. I mean, what this neighborhood really needs is flood mitigation. So could someone address whether and where the plan for addressing the real threat to this neighborhood is?
I don't know the specific plans, but I do know that from the flooding event that Braxton and his team has been doing a lot in the way of studying various neighborhoods and items that relate to issues that occurred in the flooding. And so there's been a number of studies that are currently ongoing as it relates to determining what types of flood improvements could be addressed. And I know that as we look at ARPA, there are a number of different flooding mitigation measures that are being considered as well for that. So, but I tell you what, it'd be best is if we allow an opportunity for me. I can get that information and I can distribute it to everyone.
Well, we've talked about it during the CIP as well, and we debated whether a project that would only would only improve by 25% was something we really should even do or not. Ultimately agreed to do it, as I recall, but I'll say it today for whenever it would come back, it's of great concern to me about, and I realize some of this issue may go outside the city limits in terms of managing where that water is coming from and where the risk is, but I certainly hope that, obviously this is a wonderful neighborhood that is well preserved and viable right now, and I hope that we could prioritize the work on protecting them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other comments, thank you for the presentation. We now move on to item B, if the clerk would read.
B is discussion regarding the allocation of American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds for the city of Topeka.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I provided the governing body an updated list of projects and funding amounts for your information. And ironically, it's already changed, so I'll provide an update to you. This is very fluid for us. As we receive new information, as utilities receives new estimates for their projects, they're providing updates to me, and so I'll provide an update in the near future. I want to remind everyone that this draft list of projects is based on feedback that I've received from the governing body, from other individuals. And based on that feedback from last time we talked about ARPA, the governing body plans to have sessions likely in January to be able to discuss the process and the projects that they want to consider for this type of funding.
if individuals have ideas, projects, or other organizations that have projects, I received a couple of emails, and you did too, related to wanting to see more information as it relates to these. We ask that you just please send them to me at btrout@topeka.org, and I can forward them on to the governing body. But that is available, and I can show every project, and we will tell whether or not it's immediately eligible for ARPA funding, or if it would have to be funded under the concept of the lost revenue component. And so we can really get down to the bottom of that. But more specifically tonight, what we're going to talk about and have a presentation on is the co-responder plan. That plan is something that is an item that is in the ARPA funding for consideration. And so I'll ask the Chief of Staff, Bill Cochran, to go through the information. There was information that was put on your table tonight related to that project. And so I'll turn it over to Bill.
Mayor, Council, City Manager, thank you. When we first started talking about ARPA dollars sometime back, there were several comments about we need to make an impact and in our community and use these dollars to help move us forward. And so when we come and look at the overall perspective of COVID and the impact in our community, it's displaced people. We've had people lose jobs, their place where they live. And so what we wanted to do is take a look at how do we improve the quality of life for a lot of individuals in the city of Topeka and make a major impact when it comes to dealing with people with behavioral health issues. And so what this plan here is a plan to expand the co-responder program that we currently have, but expand it to a level that will allow us to provide services to a lot of individuals in our community that are less fortunate and don't have the means and access to behavioral health services. What this program does is it takes us to the next level. Currently, we have co-responders that we contract through with Vallejo that serve hand in hand with the police department. This program enhancement will allow us to add a paramedic to this team. And so what it will allow them to do is when they respond to behavioral health calls, as they're active calls, to triage those calls and mitigate whether we need to go to emergency rooms, assess what level of treatment those individuals may need, and also allow some medical care to take place in the field. And that'd be the first, those are the responding teams. Then the follow-up team would be teams that go out within 72 hours or so, make contact with individuals that are referred to them either by the hospital or by the other law enforcement, fire, behavioral health facilities, to go out and follow up. Because a lot of times when individuals go to the emergency room, they may be given prescriptions and stuff like that. They're still in a state of a crisis. They're coming out of that crisis, they're sent home, and a lot of times they don't know the follow-up instructions or don't understand those follow-up instructions. And the follow-up team would allow that service to take place and also reduce emergency calls back to the emergency room. This program also will expand it in the aspect that currently we don't provide any juvenile or adolescent services through this program other than, the initial response. Had conversation initially with Family Service and Guidance Center. They are very excited about this opportunity to be at the front end of this. And so this plan here adds Family Service and Guidance Center into that mix. And so it'll be an enhancement with the Topeka Police Department, Topeka Fire Department, Vallejo, and Family Service and Guidance Center. As we all know, Family Service and Guidance Center provides those juvenile and adolescent services. So with the ARPA dollars, what we would be able to do is get this program to that level and provide a high-quality level of service to individuals at the front end of a behavioral health crisis. This program also, this plan here also includes the purchase of vehicles. It'd be a one-time purchase. And the ARPA funding would go basically for 2 years. And at the end of that 2 years, if this is not working to where we want it to be or whatever, those vehicles can be retrofitted back into the fleet within the fire department and the police department. The enhancement of this program also, one of the things that we want to look at is how this becomes sustainable into the future after the ARPA dollars expire. And where that comes into play is that having those members from Vallejo and Family Service Guidance Center at the level that they are, they will be able to have billable services. And so once the program gets established and up and running, they'll have those billable services, which will then be able to fund their positions for the sustainment of the program as it goes forward. What this program also will do is allow us to make an assessment of where we're at on what level of medical response and stuff we would like our fire department to have in the future, and also lays the framework and the groundwork to where the fire department in the medical response arena could potentially have billable services in the future as well. And so what this is really just taking the current program that we have and really improving our outreach to those that are unsheltered, those that are in a behavioral health crisis, and allow a more adequate, professional, and a more humane treatment of individuals in those situations.
Questions for Chief of Staff, Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of questions. Is Vallejo putting in any money towards this? Is the mission putting in any money towards this to pay for some of this?
Initially, no. That's why we would like to use the ARPA dollars to get the program up and running and get it established, allow us to hire those individuals, and then, like I said, once we get the program established and we're providing services, they'll have billable services, and then they'll be able to start paying for their personnel.
You're talking about Vallejo. Is the mission putting in any money to this?
No, this is not, the mission really isn't in this plan. This is a program that's kind of under the arena of paramedicine, if you're familiar with that. Paramedicine is basically that where you provide those all-in-one services and company services.
Okay. The other question I have is, we had a meeting months ago because of the numerous issues that we were having in Oakland with a handful of mostly chronically homeless individuals that appeared to also have major mental health issues. And so, we met and talked about this issue, and the question was broached to me if, I would be about a CIT position. I'm not going to talk more about what we talked about for next year, but a CIT position, and I think that was you were looking at $140,000 or something around there for one position that had not been filled, or that some people thought had not been filled. I don't know if it was for second or third shift. And so I thought, well, yeah, that's a really good idea. And then I saw with this ARPA that it went up to, I think, $350,000, and now it's to $1.5 million. And the presentation, should we be looking for what the expected outcomes are for this? I just think that this is a huge leap. Huge. It's not even listed as a possible pilot program where you would start out with maybe 1, 2 at the most. And has there been any comparison on cities our size, what their CIT teams are looking like? Are they more, are they the same, are they less, or?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the CIT program. I basically initiated that with the police department basically 10 years ago. What this program, what these steps are, is this takes this way above the basics that's being provided in most communities. We have a co-responder program, like you said, and in the police department's budget, we did a line item budget of $140,000. That's basically to cover 3 crisis responders through Vallejo. What this program does, it will shuffle that a little bit. It'll add 2 crisis responders from Family Service and Guidance Center to provide adolescents and juvenile services, and then it would be 2 adults from Vallejo. And so we can get outcomes and stuff like that. We can put that all together. What this basically is really just an idea to run by. We're still in the ARPA discussion dollars, and that's what, the meetings come in January really will get down to. But these were, there were some questions about, and so when you talk about CIT is rolled into this. We got, it would be adding another officer. The cost is up because it's also adding fire personnel to include paramedics. Now, in the follow-up teams, they may not need to be paramedics, could be EMTs. And part of that is, they'll take blood pressure, blood sugar tests and stuff like that. Again, it's kind of lays the foundation of where do we want to go in the future with our medical response from the fire department. And that seems to be a key question that we haven't decided as a body what that looks like. And because, we're still talking about paramedics, how many paramedics do we want, things like that. And so when we talk about the cost difference, that's what we're talking about. It's adding fire personnel, which wasn't included in those original conversations that we had a couple months ago. And then it also adds a third or a fourth co-responder position.
So are you saying that this is kind of a state-of-the-art program? I mean, when I asked if there was anything comparable in other cities already.
There's nothing comparable to in the state of Kansas. Arizona, California, your major cities those are major states like that, they have a large homeless or unsheltered population with a high behavioral health issue population is where these programs are really grounded at.
And so the discussions then have been with, obviously, the fire department, the police department, discussions have been had with Vallejo, discussions have been had with Family Service and Guidance Center to bring up this plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've met so far with Family Service and Guidance Center. Vallejo has already been involved, but we have a meeting next week to where we really will talk to all the partners involved. And, if one of the partners say we really don't want to do this, then, this may become a mute endeavor at that point too.
Okay, and I understand that these are just beginning conversations, just the amount was like, my eyes almost popped out of my head, so, but I understand, again, beginning conversations, and later on as we get past this, I mean, I just have more comments to make with ARPA, but thank you, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Dobler to be followed by the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, this sounds like a great program. I would probably generally be in favor of it. I'm not really going to be in favor of using ARPA dollars for salaries because down the road, we're going to have to fill those holes with basically general fund dollars. So even though it sounds pretty good to go 1 or 2 years to see how it works, I think we have to be really careful about adding additional salaries without a long-term plan. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Lena stole my thunder there, but as usual. I would like to ask a couple questions.
Madam Mayor, could you have the deputy mayor put on his microphone? I'm not.
There you go. Okay. Thank you. It's kind of a little bit to follow up on both Councilwoman Christina Valdivia-Acala and Neil. I like the idea of CITs. I really do. I think they're essential in this community. Bill and I went through a time when we worked here with the police department and we had other resources available to us when we were responding to calls for unsheltered and people with struggles with mental health in the community, and we had resources that then went away with different administrations, and the department has tried to fill that gap in different ways, and I think this approach of combining law enforcement and mental health professionals working together is important. How do we and have we tracked our success at doing that? How many incidents or events has the department responded to? What has resulted from having that partnership? Have we been able to better serve that population that has created this need for CIT? And again, if we were going to pilot it for a couple of years, would we have a tracking system to make sure that the outcomes that we hope for are being achieved, so that if in fact it turns into something we want to continue, it'll be a decision of how we will fund it? So just some questions like that.
Yeah, like I said, CIT's been in existence for about 10 years, and we have all those stats. The last time I looked at stats when I was at the police department, we had a 96% referral rate out of the judicial system, which means that 96% of the people that we dealt with did not go to jail that were in a behavioral health crisis. And so we can get all those numbers and we can get all that stuff. This, when we talk about a pilot program, the CIT, this is expanding the current program. So that's why I don't consider it a pilot program, because we're already in existence. This is an expansion of it. I think the key thing here to keep in mind is currently the CIT program has 2 officers and a sergeant assigned to it, so we're only adding one officer. It does not have any fire personnel assigned to it right now on a permanent basis, but the fire department does provide some personnel to it. And so what this really allows the city of Topeka to do is have trained, qualified people that respond to these type of calls instead of the routine patrolman that has to respond to these calls. And so when you talk about personnel costs, we already have the personnel costs. It's just whatever the assignment that those individuals will be having.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess as I listen to this, I'm looking at some of the other proposals on the list and thinking about some of the input we've gotten as well. And hopefully this is okay to just kind of shoot across to city manager and chief of staff. But we've talked about outcomes here, but I think we also need numbers. I mean, what is the need? What are we spending to service this population now to achieve the outcomes that you're talking about? And then how many people are unserved? Whether you're planning to just provide more services to the same population of people or similar services to additional people, what is it that we would be, what need would we be addressing with this program? And then what outcomes would we be predicting? To kind of help with that, I don't want anybody to waste time doing applications and so on, but we do have an outcomes-based application format that we use for our social service grants here. And so if people would keep that in mind, what kinds of questions are there for people to describe the need, the numbers, the proposal, who the partners are, and so on. Maybe that would help people kind of self-screen and develop their proposals, maybe refine them a little bit so that they would convey the full plan and be more convincing to the council about them being really strategic investments. So I do think there's a commitment. Maybe there is consensus about salaries as well, but at least that it's strategic investment. So.
As we continue discussion, I know that there might be more. I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity also to hear from the public. We do have 4 individuals signed up to speak in public. Yes.
I know. Since I'm going to piggyback off of everything that was just said before we break that up.
Sir, yes,
and
sir.
then please we can listen, if that's okay, Mayor. Sorry. I don't know where this specific plan will go. I don't know what its outcome will be, and I don't know that I'm all in on it. Here's what I do know. I do know that as we've gone the last year and a half of listening to our citizens and having multiple conversations about policing, we have heard a desire from our citizens not to defund our police department, but to move some pieces around to ensure that the resources are going directly towards helping particularly those who are in desperate need. We all acknowledge and know that in this capital city, we have a lot of individuals suffering in mental health crises and others. The second part of that is just talk to the police officers and they will tell you they are not healthcare professionals, nor are they ever going to be trained to be. And when they show up to a situation when someone is in some sort of crisis, they need and want a resource there to tell them what is happening, how do we respond, and how do we all get out of this situation safely so that we have not created additional conflict and done more harm than good in this situation. And I've said up here many times as we've talked about our need to improve community policing and benefit that population of our people when they are in distress. I don't know if this is the best plan. What I do know is I hope we take this opportunity to move forward and look at this idea or some form of it and recognize that there is a great need for exactly this type of program, not just in our police department, but probably nearly all of them across the country, probably in any city, but specifically our sizes and larger, because it benefits not just the citizens, but the officers on the beat. And I will go back and I will send you the link. It actually answers some of the questions that were brought up by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala and a few others to the June 6th CBS This Morning piece that was an hour long that actually spent half of there specifically talking about these crisis response teams across the country and the impact that they are having in their communities, how they operate, who's involved with them, how they've figured out some funding. And I will send that link back around. It's not a catch-all that'll solve all our answers, but it'll give us a good reference point. So whether it's this plan or something else, I do think this points to something we should take a look at moving forward, and hopefully this is a bounce off for that. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in response to Spencer, to Councilperson Spencer, I forgot his last name. All of a sudden it went blank. Duncan. Spencer Duncan. Okay, sorry. I totally believe that there should also be some kind of crisis team set up, and I think we do need to have that conversation at a very deep level and not just converse about it. We should act in some capacity. Now, I'm not about defunding the police, but what I'm also looking at is reading articles and seeing programs to where the mental health services are separate from the police and they are able to deal with, I'm not saying every kind of call, but many of the calls that our TPD officers should not have to, that are, I'm not saying like, a clear and present danger kind of thing and, anything of that nature, but they do it on both coasts. They have these emergency response teams, CIT teams, or whatever you want to call them, but again, they're not connected at the hip with TPD, and I think that should also be part of the conversation that we have. Not just what is going to be attached to TPD and deal with calls that, for some of these calls, may not even need that law enforcement component, and which may actually escalate. So I don't want to get off course here, but I do agree those are conversations that we really need to have, especially with the growing mental health crisis that is happening locally and across the country. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. And now to listen to some public comment, we have Mr. Joseph Ledbetter.
Thank you, everybody, and board. I was looking at these various project proposals a couple weeks ago, and so I'm going to kind of tee off on some of what I saw earlier and throw in some suggestions. On the water topics, I definitely believe in getting the lead abated that is there, although I'm not sure how much of it there is because they couldn't tell us how much there is. But if we do that, I want them to get the lead out. I've watched these water projects and we're not keeping up. We're not anywhere near the capacity that was claimed in the CIP budgets of the number of water line miles that are supposed to be replaced. I've heard numbers as high as 6 miles a year to justify the 21% rate increases we've had since January of 19, and I'm not seeing it. In fact, I'm not seeing them even keep up with what they had. So those management issues are going to have to be addressed if you're going to put a lot of money in these pots. Because otherwise, we're going to be bumping up against 2024. It's got to be allocated. Okay, you did that, but now it's got to be spent by 2026. And we cannot have these projects hanging out there month after month and year after year uncompleted, or the goals not being met. So you're going to have to really drill down on the management of that department and those sections. And that may sound uncomfortable, but it's not going to work if you don't do that, because it's already not working. As I drive around the city and I see these promises that were made about water line replacements, and I'm on next door, and I'm constantly seeing people complaining about, I don't have water today. I'm on Boswell. I don't have water. I'm over here. I don't have water. So we're not keeping up, even though we put a lot more funding into these projects through the CIP. So I'm going to stay off this co-responders issue. I do respect the CIT model that we've got, but I don't know enough about what's being talked about to discuss that. I have no problem with putting some money into some of our poor areas. I think Neil mentioned this a couple weeks ago, the at-risk and intensive care areas. We're going to put some street, mill and overlays extra into this, then let's do it. But again, you're going to have to really benchmark these things and say, okay, this is in addition to what we did with CIP and the sales tax, and I've got to see progress. I've got to see these additional projects done, and the departments have got to tell you exactly what they're going to do. And they, like I tell my clients, I say, put it in writing, get the email, get something. I don't want to hear he said, she said. Give me something material that I can hang on somebody if it's needed. And these timelines are critical. And so Neil knows that. He's an engineer. I mean, and I'm not picking on Neil. I'm just saying that you've got to pay attention to these timelines, especially with this money, because if you pick projects and then there's no supervision that's adequate to make sure that the timelines are met, somebody's going to be very embarrassed in a couple of years or 3. I also really am not excited about putting more money into City Hall. I'd rather that be put out in the community. All that, I think it was $3.5 million was proposed. We've already spent a lot of money on City Hall, so I'd like the citizens to get more benefit from this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next person is Thomas Underwood.
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity. I'm going to take this off. I'm Tom Underwood. I'm the Executive Director of the Noto Arts Entertainment District. Appreciate the opportunity this evening to present to you briefly in regards to the ARPA funds. I'll do a quick call out to several of the key stakeholders in Noto, John Bolander, who will be joining me here in just a moment to speak, also Pedro Concepcion and Stacy Ogle, who are here this evening to lend their support for Noto's efforts in regards to the things that we've been trying to accomplish. According to Visit Topeka, Noto is the 3rd most popular tourist destination in the county. We follow Lake Shawnee and the state capitol, 2 entities that have been around for a long, long time and have significant funding base. Noto continues to not only be the 3rd most popular tourist destination, we're consistently voted on as best of Topeka in many categories, best place to bring an out-of-towner. So we attract people not only from the community, from the region, from the nation. We have people from California to Maine, from Minnesota to Texas, and from around the world. It's pretty remarkable, actually. We're celebrating 11 years. So again, think about these other organizations or entities that have been around for a long, long time. We've been around for 11 years. It's pretty remarkable that we do not get the benefit of any tourism dollars whatsoever. We do not get transit guest tax funds. We do not benefit from the Tourism Business Improvement District. We're doing this on our own. We've been doing this on our own for the most part. We do not have a underlying funding base which to support what we're doing. Noto's success has been in a large part due to the innovation and the tenacity and the grit of small businesses and small organizations. It's been successful in a large part due to our continuing pursuit of grants and donations, small and large, to help us support what we're doing. And it's due in part to the support of the community as a place for the community for arts and entertainment. As you know, North Topeka is no stranger to difficulties, flooding and neglect, and poverty over the decades. But this last couple of years has been particularly challenging. So one of the things when we were going to speak this evening, I thought who better to really talk about the impact of COVID, the impact on our district than John Bolander. John wears many different hats. I'll let him introduce himself in regards to that. But I thought for this particular piece of this, I wanted to ask John to speak to the impact of COVID on the Noto Arts Entertainment District. John?
Next person signed up to speak is Mr. John Bolander.
Thank you, Mayor and councilpersons. I'm the chair this year of the Noto Board. My wife and I have 2 businesses, and we live in Noto. We're all small businesses going all in. 2019 was a great year, a lot of momentum. Got the park built. 2020, COVID hit. Couldn't use the park. I know for the wheelbarrow, 40% down. Neighbors similar. A lot of it's driven by events. First Friday, Noto Live, third Friday. We need Redbud Park and what the Noto organization does to help the businesses keep it maintained. Anything that could help keep this going, keep the momentum going, would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we provided a list of various projects, activities, things that we think can help Noto serve to draw even more of a crowd, to serve as, to continue to be a destination location for the community and beyond. Some of these are basic supports. Some are things just to keep the streets clean, to keep the trash dump, those kinds of things. Some of these are capital improvements. Some of these are projects that we think can take Noto to the next level of a place that people enjoy, that will delight visitors, and will help us to hopefully regain some lost ground. So with that, there's a quick list of some projects that we put together. Some of these have been in the development and planning for some time. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, sir. Typically during public comment, we don't do back and forth, but we appreciate the report. Thank you very much. The next person signed up to speak is Lizone Gray.
Dang, that didn't work out good.
Can't go home now.
Thank you, governing body, for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this issue. I was looking over the most recent recommendations, and of course, with job training and digital literacy portion, I'm very I'm pleased to see that there is support for those areas there, especially on the broadband digital literacy program. And so I do want to commend the city manager and their staff for making this recommendation. I have been speaking with Councilwoman Alcala and others in the community about how these neighborhood network type of hubs could be put in place. Mary Thomas with the CRC has really put together a great overview and proposal. I will let Councilwoman Alcala present that and share that, because it seems like you're still just in recommendation mode. But I do want to stand and speak in very support of that, because not everybody can do everything. I can be a voice, but that doesn't mean that I can always write well. And so there are people who can write well who may not always be the voice. But when they come together and make things happen, then I think that the people are going to be getting something that is best for the city. So I do want to stand in support of that broadband digital literacy perspective, as well as Impact Avenues, because I think that that is a very worthy program. I would hope that with this once-in-a-pandemic opportunity, that funds would be looked at and utilized, whereas we can do things that will be teaching a person to fish other than just giving them a fish. So as I went and looked through the other recommendations, and I know I don't have a lot of time, but there are some things, especially when it comes to the job training. I think it's the job training with the Washburn Tech estimate providing childcare during school time. I've often talked about the leveraging of available public funds. The city shouldn't have to pay for everything, the county or the state. But if everybody is getting funds, I think that when you're speaking together, you can figure out what part of it that is best for us. Childcare is something, if they are low income, TANF, or receiving food assistance, that would probably have them eligible where childcare would be provided for them. So it's not so much that you would have to look at spending monies for childcare for everyone if you are looking at trying to assist targeted populations. Giving a person a shower is giving them a fish. Giving a person a skill is teaching them to fish. So even within the job training and Washburn Tech, which is a great institution, I still stand on what I had mentioned before as far as pre-apprenticeship, transitional jobs programs, because I believe that these are the type of things that can dovetail into one, they will still be eligible for the very same support services from the federal funds, from the Department of Labor, as well as state TANF funds, from child care, transportation, and other support services and things that our people will be needing. But they will also be able to get in some type of intro level into seeing what skills that they are so that we can track people either into Washburn Tech, into OJT, into apprenticeships, or into entry-level employment. It is no secret that the trade industry is looking for people wanting to work. But Washburn Tech, great institution, may just give them a singular opportunity of CDL, or just one or the other. So I think that there's an opportunity here to provide more options. I know I'm going to run out of time. I'm not sure if I can get any extra minutes, but I will ask for them. 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition, you have 2 minutes more.
Thank you. One of the final things that I would like to bring up is, and I've been here before on this issue years ago, I know that there are different organizations that are identified in the recommendations for funding. I don't know if these are earmarks or designating specific organizations for funds, but from my understanding, public funds should be let on an open, fair, and competitive basis. So if there's any specific organization that you're earmarking, then that means that you're eliminating some other organization that possibly could have the ability of submitting a proposal. What I had submitted and shared with the city manager and I think his team was just really amounts of monies. $2 million over 4 years for small businesses, loans, and grants. That doesn't earmark anything to any specific business, but it puts that benchmark out there. $500,000 for job training. $500,000, the things that were earmarked or line item, job training, digital literacy assistance, community violence intervention. What is that? But if there are public funds and there's an RFP process to make sure that there's open, fair, and equitable competition, equal access to opportunity. Then there's a amount of money out there for community violence intervention. There's an RFP process, and then some other programs that may be good to apply can apply. There isn't any line item for any specific business for water infrastructure repairs or sewer. That wouldn't be fair to other for-profit companies who may want to bid on these. So I think that the amounts of monies can be hashed out, and then some type of process with equity at its center should be in place. So if it is community intervention, prevention, then that is where RFP should be, so that other organizations could apply for those funds. I think that is the legal thing that needs to be done. I'm not an attorney, but I think that public funds has to be let on an open, fair, and competitive basis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Additional comments from the governing body. Councilman Duncan.
Last week, Councilmember Lesser made a comment that was, and thanking the city manager, rightfully so, that this list got the conversation started. And at some point, you have to have something to work from. No idea what that'll look like when you're done, but you got to start somewhere. And I know this week, we've gotten some emails from some other organizations that have said, hey, when is our chance to talk to you about these funds? And I guess the thing we need to do a better job over the next 3 months, as the city manager said tonight, our first workshop on this won't be until January, is make it a little more clear that this is your opportunity to do exactly what has happened tonight in 2 cases. In Lazone coming up here and saying, hey, here's some suggestions, and I'm sure he will be willing to expand on that and send us some information. And Mr. Underwood bringing us a 3-4 page document saying, hey, NODO is in need. We would like to put throw our hat in the ring, and here's exactly what we would use those funds for. And so I guess I just want to get that message out to the community that I know that this will be on the agenda of every meeting we have the rest of this year. We plan to have a workshop in January. We all will talk to you and we have emails. And so now is your chance to let us know what those programs are that you think might be a viable option for these dollars to put them on the radar. And so I just want to figure we need to do a good job of getting that message out there to people so they have a better understanding of that as we respond to some of those questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. From the beginning of this process for ARPA, I think that all of us knew that this was totally uncharted territory, totally. And I've made comments about, how deliberate and intentional we need to be, how there needs to be transparency, how there needs to be community voice, et cetera. And I think others have too. And then we have started getting, more and more emails from social service organizations. And then Councilwoman Hiller brings up, we have a process through SSG, but, what are we going to do? Does that mean we're going to try to put that forward for them? So my sense is we're all trying to come up with the best way to deal with this. And appreciate what the city manager has done with putting it together, just like what you're saying, Spencer. But I think until, and you're saying, everybody, okay, here's your chance, come get it. But there's no process in place. And when I was looking at some articles, earlier today, I did some reading from the Brookings Institute, and they are recommending with ARPA funds 3 major components: stabilize, strategize, and organize. And I think that this is like the birthing of it, but I don't know what that means. So I would like someone to explain what that process may really mean for these organizations that want to apply for money. Doesn't automatically mean it's going to happen. Because my concern is if we don't get more of a process in place, again, which Councilwoman Hiller is alluding to, my thought is that when we come to have those work sessions, we're going to be in a hot mess. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't have the answers.
And I think that, beautifully stated, first of all. I think that the first thing that this governing body needs to do, and it's not a staff issue, it's a governing body issue, is for us to take a look again at the priorities that we've been talking about that the federal government has for these funds. So again, recapping, aside from infrastructure projects in low-income neighborhoods where individuals are disproportionately impacted, the other area is broadband. Another area is making sure that there's crime mitigation, as well as the other one I think was, the utilities, of course, but that one is not for the community. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out if those that the community will come in and do RFPs for us. And I think that the next step really will be for us to have a deep dive of understanding where the federal government says that we can allocate those dollars. And then us take a look at where do we feel that the city of Topeka would benefit the most for the greatest long-term impact. And based on that, have a separate allocation of saying, okay, so much of these funds, this percentage of these funds is going to be used in infrastructure and road, sidewalk projects, and then this percentage of the fund will be going into RFPs, and then us dividing those percentages to make it just a little bit simpler. But I think that what's happening right now is, again, we're very grateful for the fact that Brent already started that process, and most of what he brought to us was a lot of infrastructure work, because we know that the citizens of Topeka have been saying, fix our roads, fix our roads, fix our roads, fix our roads. But at the same time, he did bring up things that people had told him. I think that now, especially in January, or even before, in one of the meetings when we talk about ARPA again, the big thing is going to be for us to have an understanding of where our soccer field is at and how we want to parse it out in percentages, so that then we can start talking to our community about, here's what you're able to submit an RFP for, because these are the strategic priorities that we feel that we want to leave an impact in. So exactly what you're saying. Just I think that this is going to have to be a deeper council discussion on where we want to see those dollars go.
And once we get to that and have that discussion, then you're saying they can do like an RFP. But are we still wanting that public input?
Absolutely. Because the public also needs to understand what the federal government is going to fund.
Right.
Because the sad thing is that what we're going to end up having is every nonprofit organization or anybody in the community that needs support coming to the city of Topeka saying, here's the list of projects that I can help you with. But if they don't meet the guideline, then we're wasting their time.
Right.
So that's why it's so critical for us to first have the open conversation in which the public and everybody that is interested in this is engaged, and then us making sure that we are communicating broadly to the community. This is what we can spend the money on. Because I think that there's a lot of confusion with regards to that.
There is confusion, Mayor, and I think that there's also just a huge chasm of little to no communication that has been that is out there for organizations that may qualify, may not, I mean, whatever, just want to be part of the discussion. And when you look at some of these other cities, they talk about lower barriers to participation is to partner with trusted community leaders such as schools, businesses, religious organizations, or community-based agencies. Now, I know that can look different ways, and that can be, very fluid, and maybe that will come after what you were talking about. But I think something needs to go out to the social service agencies and other partners that have been long-standing partners of ours and good partners of ours, because they're in the dark. And I think that they're frustrated. And I think that whether they are going to be able to utilize these funds or not is kind of like a moot point. The stronger point in this is communication. And that's what I would stress too. But thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, no. Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to kind of respond to Noto. First of all, appreciate you guys being here. You guys have done a fantastic job there. I did want to make sure you knew that, I don't know what the timing will be, but obviously there is going to be one of the organizations is going to be going off the TGT, I believe, correct? So I think there will be an opening for, Mr. Duncan, is that your committee?
We believe so, but until they have some legal contract saying otherwise, they're still queued up.
Okay.
It's kind of in limbo.
Okay. Just want to make you aware of that, so thanks.
And by the way, just a shout out to Bolander. He's got a new fig sandwich. I was just there last week with my kid. It's fig, prosciutto, and goat cheese, I think, and it is, whew. So please visit Noto and shop there and shop often. Yes, Councilwoman Hiller.
Well, speaking of that, I had a hangover today for lunch with an out-of-town guest, so, whew, really only half a sandwich is probably all a person should have for lunch, but I ate the whole thing. Something for us to think about is, just in terms of not wasting anybody's time, I mean, even something like utilities, with rate increases, if we can get things done and done soon with ARPA money, we're talking about $10 and $20 a month increases in utility bills for people citywide too. Most of everything on this list interrelates one way or another to bringing more people to town or saving everybody money or some sort of strategic investment. I don't know. I know that city manager, when I had my one-on-one with him, had a ballpark in his mind of dividing up like 25% for this and 25% for this. And I don't know if we want to start there or just entertain. I'm guessing people have held back because they've not been invited to apply. And so they're sort of waiting or wondering whether they'll ever be invited to apply. I hate to have people do it twice or come up in a line of 20 in public comment if we're not really ready. I don't know what first step is the best, truthfully, but we might want to see if we could figure that out. So, if we just want people to send in an idea to kind of get on a master list. I was contacted, had a visit with somebody from the COVID-related nonprofit group that's been meeting, I think she said 82 weeks in a row or whatever it's been, to work together and do the very best that they could to provide a strong safety net for everyone in town, whether it's just money or mental health or some sort of other crisis. They would probably be willing to work together on something if we gave some parameters out as well. And there might be other coalitions that would come together or that we could propose. I'm thinking that even some of the things we've heard today, we would want to see vetted, or again, like the social service grants do, where you say, who's your network? Who all are you working with? And make sure that it's not just coming, whether it's from a city department, an idea that a city department had, or an idea from somebody outside, that we give it enough time to have some sort of structure so people kind of know what we'd like to see. I don't know that we're going to do that tonight, per se, but it might be a good step.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. To answer your question or comment, Councilwoman Hiller, I think, I volunteered earlier this evening and still will to take anybody that has a request. If they want to have a conversation and say, here's my idea, is it ARPA qualified? And then, there's the other thing is that there are some, such as our utility projects, that are clearly called out as being eligible. Others may have to fall into the lost revenue. It's a governmental function, we can fund it. And that's going to be a very narrow amount of dollars that are going to be available, and there will be the difficult part. I think, looking at our utility issues and some of the things that we have with the purpose of not needing to borrow money as much and watch what we're doing with the water rates, I think that's why I looked at the roughly around 35 million going towards infrastructure projects and about 10 million that was available to social service type projects or other types of things within the community, not utilities. Now that was mine. I looked at that being a way that it would have a lasting impact, because not raising rates, et cetera, as much would have a lasting impact for a lot of people. And so, and it would help potentially get some projects done that have been sitting on the list for a while. But I can vet those projects and no matter what, pass them on. I mean, if people want, they can CC their favorite council member as well to make sure that it's included on the list. I'm fine with that. But I can give that initial cut to those individuals that are interested. And then from there, if it's something that's qualified in some way or fashion, add it to the list. And then when you get to January, you'll be able to determine how much of a process you have to have, because things may become clear. You may, at your first meeting, things are clear, these are the ones we want to fund, or you may decide you want to do an RFP process with X amount of money and support the organizations and make decisions.
Well, I appreciate your reiterating that, because I was afraid that maybe the message we left is that everybody should sign up for public comment every week. But if the guidance at this point would be anybody who's even thinking about it, should that pass the city manager, that works for me. It gives people some direction.
And again, I think that, let's reiterate what Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala and I just said. We really need to, before people start sending in to the city manager their ideas, we need to make sure that the community understands what is something that can be funded by these funds. Because if we're not doing that, if we're not being clear, we're telling people to spin their wheels and try to make a pitch to the city manager that may or may not work for these funds. So I think that the number one step, like Councilwoman Valdivia was saying, is ensuring that that we have a full presentation again before we go into the whole process of our retreat in January, your retreat in January. Did not mean to smile when I said that. And just kidding. But once the retreat in January happens, the reality is that this council needs to be 100% certain of what these funds are available for. The last thing that we want to do, even though we already have had that conversation, the last thing that we want to do is do something, which is why I requested the city manager consider having an outside counsel, an auditor, to let us know if anything that we're going to do is going to apply to those funds, because there's a lot of regulation on these funds. So I think that the number one thing is this governing body having a full understanding of exactly where the funds can go. And then once we have that understanding, making sure that we're communicating it out to all of the organizations in our community so that everybody understands then what they can be sending out stuff for. Because if somebody is, the frustration is going, if we're sending a message now to send to the city manager your idea, and they don't hear back from him, or they keep getting no, the frustration in our community is gonna grow. So the communication has to be clear, and I think that maybe what I'm imploring the governing body to consider is just telling our constituents, yes, we had the conversation on Tuesday, that we need to set these priorities so that you understand, like Lazone was saying in his comments, what you can apply for, so that everybody in the community that can serve these needs specifically that Topeka has chosen to invest in, then can start sending in. But I think that the frustration will absolutely grow if we just tell people, hey, start sending city manager stuff, because it's going to fill up his inbox, and it's going to more than likely be a 50% of the stuff that it's not going to be able to work.
Should we set up, if we haven't already, a web page? I mean, we've had a presentation, there's documents that we've had, and then the staff broke it down into a PowerPoint that we had a week ago. I'm thinking of the work that we've done on Change Our Culture, where staff just put together a web page for all of that, and it had a little banner on the front page of the city's website, so it was easy to just pull up topeka.org and click on, in this case it would be ARPA, and just be able to pop into whatever materials we have that could be progressive as we consider it more. Just don't want to keep repeating it in a council meeting if we're ready to have people vet the kinds of things that, for instance, what Lazone said, we talked about childcare once, and that was somebody's idea, but if in fact people who, if we have enough childcare available in the community, we just need to deploy it maybe a little differently, and that's not a need. Those are the kinds of things I want to make sure. And again, people can vet it with city manager, but I want us to, each one of them.
Councilwoman Ortiz?
Don't know.
Well, if Liz would unmute me, she muted me and then told me she muted me. I would like to see us put something on the website. That's why I was trying to get your attention, so that people can go to the website and they can check, and that will inform them and whether they qualify or not, and that will save a lot of time and effort before we get started. There's so many questions, and there's already so much miscommunication out there that everybody thinks that they can get a part of this money. So I think, just to save us all time, we have a great website, and I think that we could put it out there and so that they can get on and start checking it. So it doesn't just bog everybody down. I think that would be great. I would also like a copy of the guidelines, because I know that we were told they were sent to us, and I know I was gone 1 week. I don't know, I'm kind of a week behind. But again, I'd like some of those guidelines resent to us so that we all understand, because I think even in our minds, well, I'll just say my mind, it's a question of, well, can we do that or can we not do that? And how are we going to continue that process? And so those are the things that I would request, is that we get a website going, send me the guidelines. I don't know if anybody else wants them, so that I can start sharing that with people as they ask, or our NIAs, or whoever we meet with, and we will all have the same guidelines, and not one person think one thing and another person think another. And that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, I mean, as Karen and I were working on the changing the culture of property maintenance and the utilization of the website, I also think that just so we can get it out there on the multiple modes of communication that we have, I think we should also be doing a press release. We should do Channel 4. We should put something on the Facebook page everywhere that we can, like we did it for the culture of property maintenance, because then we're using every avenue.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I agree, and I think that the first communication is exactly what we just said, that we are going to go through a process, that we are going to communicate this, that we will allocate percentages of how we see this money being spent so that people then can start submitting. So I mean, that's going to be critical. So, yeah, great discussion. Councilman Duncan?
I'll just throw out a reminder, too, as we go through this process, that we still have $2.5 million of CARES Act money. And while I know we like to sit on money around here sometimes, and I know it's earning interest, we may come across programs, and that money obviously was a little more specific in what it has to be spent on. But I think as we move forward, we will see specific needs of community assistance, whether it's small business funding or some of those issues. And so just want to be aware that while it's nice to have that money, at some point we need to spend it, and this is an opportunity too to see if we have some programs that can fit under that purview also, and slide it over to there. So thank you, Mayor.
Great discussion. Yes, Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you. I am very supportive of what we've been talking about, so just good job, everybody. And Chief of Staff, I really appreciate the work that you put into your initial presentation that before we got conversation. I'm very supportive of that as well. I think that if we are going to put something up on the website, which I think would be great, that we have a calendar. Let people know when these different steps are due, so we can make that even clearer, be better in our communication with that as well. Because I know that I had several conversations today where people looked at the list that was on our agenda and said, oh my God, like, how did I need to do that? And when is this gonna happen? I personally did not know, but I knew that it was in the future. If we could nail down some dates and make that very clear to the public, I think that would be extremely helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Great discussion, guys. More to come. We now move on to public comment. First person is Paul Lastly.
The last time I was here, I was about the trailer court there in North Topeka, the problems that we was having. Today, it's I don't know if it's been resolved already since the last week, Friday or Saturday. But the company next door that moved in there is called Hydro Marine, and they make these huge airboats, and they seem to have a field day aggravating us by pointing them propellers right at the court, literally blow your hat off while you're standing there trying to ask them not to do that, to point it some other direction. So that is one issue, because we have a lot of elderly people there, And when they say, well, if you don't like that, why don't you move to another trailer court? You know, we have no place to go. And most of us are on fixed incomes. And that's my main concern tonight. Another issue, if I have time, is the highway, road infrastructure in the city. In 2019, I had 4 tires that were totally ruined from chuck holes. So, I mean, we all probably know about that. And now we see a lot of infrastructure, paving and what have you. And I'm always struck, I'm 80 years old. And I remember when I was in my 20s, working for the highway department in North Carolina, they had classes for people that went to work there before they ever went out on a job anywhere. And one of the main things that they stressed was that if you have a chuck hole and you fill it with the right material. And the number one thing that you had to do was square the hole up. In other words, if it, you had to get all the debris out of the bottom and then square the hole up to the depth of the hole. And then a sealer, and then the right material, and then another sealer, compacting and whatever. And I have personally stood at the corner of 17th and Lane, Washburn, that whole area there, and watched the people come by with truckloads of asphalt and just pull up to the hole, put a shovelful in there, hit it a couple times, and go on. And then the bus come along and throw it right back out, So there's nobody checking what that person did and how he did it. And they obviously don't know, because when you ask them, most of them don't speak English, which is, I don't know, I think they use that as an excuse not to be able to explain what they're doing. I mean, that's another issue. So I'm not an expert, but and I do know the second most important thing that we was taught was that maintenance. If you put asphalt down, you've got to keep it up. If you put concrete down, you have to, water is the main enemy of all that. We learned that, and they've not learned that here. They don't seal anything when they got a crack, and after a couple rains, that road bed is ruined because the water's got down into the road bed and deteriorates. Now you got all these things.
Sir, do you need additional time?
I've done that to the best of my ability, as far as my expertise is limited, but I do have a lifetime of experience.
We're not supposed to go back and forth. I know. That's what I was going to say. Sir, do you, if your councilwoman would love to speak with you, so do you mind? Because we'll pause pretty soon. We're just going to do announcements. If you want, Councilwoman Valdivia can come up to you, sir, so that she can talk with you, and also our staff will be here for you. If you don't mind waiting a few minutes while we're done with the meeting.
Appreciate your
Okay.
patience.
Thank you so much, sir. The next person signed up to speak is Ms. Sandra Lassiter.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Well, that is just wonderful right there. Thank you very much. Okay, I thank you for this opportunity. Sandra Lassiter, 4210 Gage, Tennessee Town, NIA Secretary and invested person. Once again, I'm here. I know it may seem like I'm beating a dead horse, but I'm not, because you are just really well alive. And I know that somebody on this council is interested in how the 12th Street project is going. It's a fiasco. And we have too many people that are really concerned about that street and the way it's being repaired. Now, I realize, and someone said, Sandy, watch out, because you have some city officials who may be in concert with the company that designed it, and they may not want to hear that. And I said, well, it's just a fact that we need another design, or we need to get with these citizens and modify the design. We want a great street on 12th Street. But for a person that stood up in, not somebody up here, in a meeting and said to these people, don't worry about it, it's going to be a great street, you're going to enjoy it, and then think about it, we're going to come back and do Huntington the same way. They're like, what? We want a one-way street going west, 12th Street, and a one-way street going east, Huntoon, and just make it a beautiful street and no bike lane, and that's wonderful. That's what these elders, taxpayers, most of them ask for. We just consider that a simple compromise. And I've talked to a number of them. Do we get a petition? Do we stage a protest? Oh my God, don't say that word. What do we do to have somebody hear our voice? 12th Street is not a good city plan for a main street. Can we at least get Topeka Boulevard to Washburn working before winter, when we're going to try to get a snowplow through there, going to try to get a fire truck through there, maybe even a police car through there? Or can we get Washburn to Gage completed? That's where most of the residents live that cannot get out of their driveway. They only have a one-way exit. Bless you. Once again, maybe the voice of people is the voice of God. Bless you all. Thank you again.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Joseph Ledbetter. He left. Oh, wow. Lazone.
Back again, thank you all for your time. Just to sort of wrap up, I would look at the city procurement site and they have their own formal and informal guidelines. Anything under $50,000 informal bid, anything over $50,000. It's just sort of a guideline for public funds. So just want to use that sort of as a benchmark on the process of distributing public funds. And I like the idea, the same process that the social services has. It's not so much of me submitting a proposal of what I want funded from here, asking for our organization. There's $500,000 available for job training. You have until X date, 5 o'clock, to submit it and then get it in. And it's going to be judged by a body of impartial individuals, and maybe we'll get funded and maybe we won't. But I do like the opportunity where I have the ability to apply. So I just wanted to mention that because it's already sort of in public procurement processes that there are informal and there are formal bids and there's guidelines that govern those. Finally, I just wanted to step back because I think that it's important to take note of a few weeks ago, and I just had not been well to come and speak. I wanted to come and speak at the JADO meeting. But some information was shared as far as like the unemployment rate in Topeka being 3.6%. And I want to reflect that to the city housing study where it said that the black unemployment rate was 10.1%. That wasn't mentioned in the meeting, and I didn't want people to leave that meeting thinking that, oh, 3.6 is great. We don't have to do anything else. There is actually some other numbers under the hood, which is why I think that funding some of these programs, if we're going to be addressing some long-term systemic situations, should be re-looked at and re-examined, saying, can we actually make a big difference long-term, sustainable? And I think that project should be sustainable if they're asking for funding. The same meeting, it had said that the total poverty rate was 9.8%. But at the same time, from the federal data, the black unemployment was 24.2%. I wouldn't want anyone to walk away from a meeting thinking, oh, 9.8% isn't bad. But that's not everybody. And so I think that these are some underlying numbers that if people don't talk about them, they're going to think that everything is okay. and it's not. And some targeted programming needs to go on so that, I think we did a great job of knocking the unemployment numbers down over the last 4 years, and then the COVID came and sort of threw things out of sync. But those numbers are real. I'm not making them up. These were the numbers of unemployment that were shared, the unemployment rate of 3.6 in Topeka and 3.2 in Shawnee County. I've said what was shared by the city staff of what the unemployment was. What was shared to the decision-making folks on poverty, 9.8, we know that there are numbers that are 24%. I don't have all of the answers, but I do believe that the money is here to actually make a difference. The leadership, if it's concerned, can actually make a difference. And I just wanted to put that information out there as you are meeting in your own back rooms, deciding on recommendations and things of that nature there. I wouldn't want you to be making decisions because unemployment is only 3.6 because it's not for everybody, or because poverty is only 9.8% because it's not for everybody neither. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We now move on to the announcements. Clerk?
No meeting
For
next
2 weeks. City Manager?
I have nothing further, Mayor.
Okay, so I will take a second to say that this is a really big weekend, week for us and the council, because it means that we do not have a meeting next week. And then the week after that is the first week of November. And for those of you who are watching, it means that there is an election for your odd number council seats as well as for your mayor. And I really would like to encourage everybody, early voting has already started. You could just show up over on Croy and you could just cast your vote. And you could do that all the way up to the Friday before the election, and then after that, they tear down so that they can start deploying in the regular polling locations. ksvotes.org, if you don't know where to go, check it out. They will tell you where to go, where your polling location is at. That way you can cast your vote in the right place, and you don't have to worry about going to a wrong place. I want to wish my colleagues the best of luck for those of you who have elections. Deputy Mayor, I don't know how much to say, but I'm hoping for a promotion for you. And seriously, just like everybody in your community, just vote. You know, and the people that are doing this, so everybody that decided to run for office, thank you. Every one of you. It's a lot of work. And you have just gone through the whole process of knocking on doors and learning from your constituents, regardless of the outcome that comes from the election and who ends up getting elected. I thank all of you that decided to get engaged. It's been a beautiful slate of people, a lot of diversity. It's just been really inspirational to see everybody that's thrown themselves out there. To my colleagues that are here, I wish you all the best of luck. It's interesting because it almost seems like this is like the beginning of it being real, that after December I will not be sitting in this seat. So again, please go out and vote. Please, please, please go out and vote. It's important. Deputy Mayor.
You got to finish the hearing, you know that.
If my health lets me, absolutely.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to give a thank you to Glenda Washington with the Greater Topeka Partnership and my wife. I probably should have said her name first, but they co-hosted an event as part of the Hispanic Heritage Celebrations. And they held an event that was kind of a social, as it were. It started off with a presentation from Dr. Mendoza. She gave a brief history of the Hispanic presence in Topeka, and how we got here, and how the families gathered, and the continuing participation that the families have in this community. It was extremely interesting and engaging because that room was full. We held it at the Jayhawk Theater Gallery, the new renovated area there. It was packed, And it started off with just a presentation from Dr. Mendoza, but then people started raising their hands and wanted to share their personal stories about their grandmother and great-grandfather, how they got here to Kansas, what brought them here, why they stayed here, what they like about Topeka. And it was really an engaging educational event, and it's something that I think I'd like to see continue on a regular basis with all the groups in Topeka who have a history of Topeka and how they got here, and what their culture has brought to Topeka to make it what we are now. So I want to thank them for their efforts on that. It was extremely engaging, and they did a really good job. And Jeff Carson provided the facility for the event, and if you get a chance to stop by that facility and take it in, I think you'll see the future and promise for that for a lot of civic groups and public groups who want to get together and visit and talk. So I just want to thank them for that effort. Like the mayor, I have a vested interest. I hope that everybody does take the time to look at all the resources that are out there, to look at your candidates. Make a decision based on good information. And however it turns out, we really want you to get out and vote. More and more I keep hearing that because it's an off election year, the turnout will be low. We can't let that happen on a regular basis. It can't be an assumed thing. We have to participate in our local government, and that's the way you do it, is with the vote. So I encourage everyone to have a plan for election day if they haven't already voted. Take care, and thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Nager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You kind of stole my thunder because I was going to talk about elections too. I know Deputy Mayor is probably very interested in my footwear, but I do have my vote shoes again today. And this year, I even have the earrings. So if you come by the office, I will be wearing this, and I can tell you how to vote. I'm not up for re-election this year, but I really want to make sure that my co-workers in this upcoming year are as wonderful to work with as our current council. If you do have more questions, you can go online, you can find out more information, or you can go ahead and call the elections office. We want to make sure that you are fully comfortable in the way that you vote, whether you're voting advanced by mail, which the deadline for that is October 26th. You vote early at the office, or you vote on November 2nd between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. At your polling place. So I encourage everyone to vote, make your voice heard, make sure your questions are answered before you go to the voting booth, and good luck to everyone running. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Dobler?
I have nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
No vote? Councilman Duncan?
Well, let's see. It has been 0 city municipal elections since a sitting congressman may have improperly voted in one of our elections. So if nothing else, I bid the rest of you a cleaner election than I had, and you won't get calls from the Kansas City Star saying, what happened over there in your district race? So here's hoping if we don't have that, and then otherwise they're uneventful and everyone goes and votes. I do have a question, since we haven't seen November's agendas yet, obviously. Do we have a plan to have a legislative agenda discussion in one of those?
Next meeting, November 9th.
Okay, perfect. Just figured it was, but I thought I'd better ask to make sure it was going to happen. It is the third Thursday of the month. Traditionally, I'm at Fairlawn Plaza, but not this Thursday. I've got another commitment. I won't be there. I will do a reschedule. Also, they have an event going on, but just let everybody know. If you show up there, I'm sure you can eat some from the new bakery that's out there, but you won't see me this Thursday, so I apologize for that. I do want to thank staff. As it was alluded to earlier, there's been a lot of road work done, a lot of overlays and some other work, and nearly all of it throughout District 8 has been wonderful. There have been a few spots where we kind of wondered what was going on in that moment, but citizens contacted myself and staff has responded quickly and gone out and looked at those situations and is working to resolve them. And so I just wanted to thank staff for for getting on it. Obviously, there's contractors, it's not city staff that does that work, but they've been very responsive in making sure that whether staff can go repair the problem or we reach out to the contractors who are getting out there to repair it. So I just want to thank them for their quick responses to those issues out in the district, and thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First thing I want to do is apologize to our head of the legal department, Amanda Stanley, for standing her up. I shouldn't say standing her up. We were to have a breakfast meeting at 7 o'clock this morning. I do apologize, Amanda, for the text I sent at 2 o'clock, in the morning, but after the 4th dose of Pepto-Bismol, I figured I might as well go ahead and text you because I knew I wasn't going to make it. I had a little food poisoning, so I apologize I couldn't be there in person tonight.
That was clear.
I'm sorry?
I said that was clear, sir.
Yeah. Well, and I've had my camera off too, if you've noticed. I wouldn't have been present here too much for the meeting, but I was listening. But the other thing is, yesterday I do want to say thank you to John Chardine and the Code and Chief Wheelis, and we have a little bit of a problem at 10th and Wanamaker behind Kelly Express. Councilman Duncan, I spoke with him as well yesterday, and he drove by, and I've never quite seen anything like it, at least in that area over there. But I want to applaud those guys for getting right on that and taking care of that. But finally, get out and vote, regardless of who you vote for. Americans died so we can do that. So go out and exercise that right that we have in this country, regardless of who it's for. And thank you very much.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I too want to mention the election briefly. Give thanks to everybody in District 1, but everybody citywide that has been out helping candidates, encouraging people to vote, getting information out, putting signs, whatever they've done. In case there is confusion, and this has been an awfully quiet campaign season, just oddly, everybody in the city needs to go to vote for mayor. People in the odd districts, or more than half the people in town, will have a council position as well. Some people aren't sure what district they live in, but just go. There's a good chance there'll be somebody on the ballot, and you can check the city's website to find out who your council person is and what district you're in, and then do some research, even if it's a little last minute. And almost everybody has 1 or 2 school board members as well. So it's more than just one thing, and we do need everybody to be out there to vote. The only other thing I have is that we have Halloween between now and the next time we meet. And I wish everyone a safe and happy Halloween venture. And for those who know me, one of my core dreams for all of our neighborhoods is that people feel safe enough and confident enough that everybody goes trick-or-treating door to door again. So I hope people will, even if it's on their block, and keep working toward that goal. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to remind everybody as well to get out and vote. Good luck to all those that are running for re-election. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Well, I'll say ditto on the voting. I think enough has been said. As everyone knows, October is my favorite month because it's Fire Prevention Month. And one of my dreams, Karen, is that everybody has working smoke detectors in their homes. So I hope you guys will remember that. Everybody except Spencer. Also, I'd like to thank the fire department for their hard work on Sunday at 3:30 at 1100 Powell. We have a vacant house with a lot of staff has been working on it. I'd like to thank staff, the city manager, the fire department, the police department. This house has been vacant. It's been a problem house, and it caught on fire with a lot of dead trees and shrubs around it. And I just want to say thank you to staff for getting to it immediately, because we could have had a huge fire, brush fire, wood fire, whatever kind of fire, tree fire, but they were very, they responded very quickly and got that out and kept us all safe. I'd also like to mention one of our NIA members who has over 35 years that I counted. I know it's more than that. His name is Jimmy Lee Rucker. I don't know, some of you might know him. And I just want to read a little bit from his obituary. Our prayers and condolences go out to him. Jimmy was not a stranger to anyone. If you knew him, you loved him. He was a pillar of the community. He was a member of the East Topeka South Neighborhood Improvement Association. He was an active member of Antioch Missionary Church for 62 years. He lived in North Topeka, and then I think it was for 12 years, and then he moved to East Topeka, and he was a lifelong resident. He will be missed. He was, I believe, in his 90s, and he lived in East Topeka most of his life. And if you knew him, you called him Mr. Rucker. He rode on the back of the trash trucks. He cleaned up. He was wherever you needed him, he was there. He served God first, his family second, and his community. He will be missed. We love him. And to his family, we love you. And we look to do something special for him. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. With that, Councilman Emerson had a family engagement that he had to tend to. We do have an executive session. If the city attorney could read the parameters.
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 30 minutes for consultation with the city attorney to discuss attorney-client privilege matters regarding specific currently pending property maintenance code violations and legal remedies as justified by KSA 75-4319B2. The open meeting will resume in the City Council chambers. The following staff are requested to assist the governing body in its deliberations: City Manager Trout, City Attorney Stanley, Chief of Staff Cochran, and Field Supervisor John Chardin.
We have heard the parameters of the executive session. What is the pleasure of the governing body? Councilwoman Hiller moves for approval. We have a second by the Deputy Mayor? Comments or questions? Seeing none, all those opposed to going into executive session, this is your time. There is no opposition. At this point in time, we enter into the executive session. Prior to that, we will have a 5-minute recess, and we will enter into our executive session. Thank you very much. To go on, Mike, so I would recommend that you hide it and you just smile. There you go. Okay, it seems like we have audio again. I just need confirmation. Are we on?
Maybe we need Susan?
We are on. All right. The executive session has concluded. No action has been taken. With no other items in front of the council, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great evening.